latest episode of the B Movie Club. I'm your host, Kevin. This week we're discussing the 1986 action thriller, The Delta Force, starring Chuck Norris, Lee Marvin. It's an all-star cast. For those of you joining us for the first time, each week on the B Movie Club, I discuss certain guilty pleasures, forgotten classics of the past. You can go ahead and go to our page on Facebook, Original B Movie Club. Give us the big thumbs up. You can also go to our page on YouTube, Kevin D. That's Me. Hit the subscribe button. It's totally free. And you can follow me on Twitter at the B Movie Club. Don't forget to spread the word. The more the merrier. The Delta Force. Movie opens up. There was a hostage crisis. The Delta Force, which is an elite military unit, anti-terrorism unit, that the government sends in to basically rescue hostages when negotiations have broken down or when we choose not to negotiate. There was a problem, unable to succeed their mission. Colonel Nick Alexander, played by Lee Marvin, is pulling the troops out. But Captain McCoy, played by Chuck Norris, has got to go back and rescue one of the soldiers because there's an explosion. He's trapped under something. Help me. So he jumps into the fire, pulls the guy out, saves him just in time for the plane to take off and leave the dangerous place behind. But he says, you know what? The government is taking advantage of us. You know, they're not listening to us when we say it's too dangerous. I'm quitting. Smash cut to a airliner being hijacked. In the 80s, for those of you guys a little bit younger, there were a lot of planes being hijacked by Arab terrorists. So this is a theme from that period of time. So this is what they were going for. So it's taken over by two Lebanese terrorists who have like grenades and like Uzis and stuff. Take us to Beirut, one of those deals. So they've got to reassemble the Delta Force, but they can only do it if Captain McCoy is leading the charge. He's the only one who could help, so they got to very quickly, they bring him back in. You think there'd be this big dramatic scene of him going like, I don't know, I'm conflicted and, you know, I've been burned before. No, he says, okay, sounds good, and they promote him. Now he's Major McCoy, so there you go. That's nice. You can just quit, and they'll just say, okay, now we'll give you, we'll promote you. How's that grab you? So, the terrorists are now landed in Beirut, with the people full flight. They're supposed to fly from Greece to like New York or something along those lines. Now they're in Beirut. It's very sad. But in flight, the evil Lebanese terrorist basically says, you know what, I want all the Jewish passengers separated because I'm going to do something about them as well. So they separate those guys, including some guy who's from like Lithuania or the Ukraine. He has like a name, like he has a very Russian-sounding name, which they think could sound Jewish. They grab him too. A Catholic priest jumps up and says, "Hey, I'm Jewish because Jesus was Jewish." They grab him too. While they touch down, they scoop up all those people and lead them away. So now they're in Beirut, separated from the rest of the hostages. So I don't want to go into all the minutia of what all happens. The Delta Force lands. They're about to rush the plane, but they discover that like a dozen other terrorists have gone on board, and a lot of the passengers would be killed if they did that. So they decide not to do that. Later, they realize some of the hostages have been separated. They have to find where the Jewish hostages are. There's a sympathetic Orthodox priest in Beirut who happens to have his church literally right next door to the terrorist compound, so he's kind of spying on them for the Israelis. So there's all this stuff going on. It's a very complicated plot. It culminates in a firefight where Chuck Norris leads the guys in, attacking the compound, shooting rockets and grenades. At one point, Chuck Norris is riding around on this crazy like it's a motorcycle, but it has like rockets that shoot off of it and like machine guns, and it's like something out of James Bond. I don't know if that's standard issue. I don't know if you can get that from your local Yamaha dealership. It's all very confusing to me, okay? So he's riding around doing tricks and launching over things. At one point, Chuck Norris, he leads the charge because he's Chuck Norris. Excuse me, Major McCoy leads the charge. He leaves the rest of he basically tells the guys, "You guys take care of this. I gotta go get the rest of the get the rest of the terrorists." He goes on and like single-handedly takes on like 20 hostages in like this military convoy. But he's got a souped up super rocket bike, so shooting rockets at him. One point, a terrorist is like behind him. He's like pulling out his gun. "I'll get you. I'll get you, you capitalist American!" And he hits a button on the back on his motorcycle, and rockets shoot out of the back and blow that guy. He doesn't even look. He's just like, boop. When you're Chuck Norris, this is how things go. I don't want to spoil it all for you. Don't want to give it all away. There's a soft spot in my heart for the Chuck Norris movies of the 80s. Just because the quality is so much lower than his contemporaries at the time, than like Stallone's movies or Schwarzenegger's. I mean, these are the very definition of B-movie quality. Okay? This company, Cannon Pictures, produced basically all of Chuck Norris's movies. And they were always kind of a step below. It was kind of low budget. You know, it was just good enough to be not straight to video, but not much better than that. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, I love Chuck Norris, but it's a lot of kind of like, the acting, a little shaky. You know, he's a martial artist, obviously we all know. But even in situations like this where he's shooting people, he'll still find time where it's like, I'm putting down my gun and I'm going to kick a guy. But he's not the most limber because he's a little bit long in the tooth, so it's like he's like kicking the guy in like the knee kind of thing. You know, with his old grizzled beard. I enjoy it. What can I tell you about this movie? It actually had, like I said, an all-star cast. Lee Marvin was actually brought in due to his Dirty Dozen connections back like 20 years prior. This is actually his last movie. They had him, even though he's like 80 years old, staggering around, he was still leading the charge as well. He wasn't up in some office in Washington going, "McCoy, get in there." No, he was there as well with his like rocket launcher and all this other stuff. You know, what are you gonna do? So originally, they wanted Charles Bronson to play the role of Colonel Nick Alexander. That went to Lee Marvin. And actually they had posters and other like publicity materials with Charles Bronson's picture on it before they finally decided to go with Lee Marvin. The head Lebanese terrorist, watching this I almost fell out of my chair, was played by Robert Forster. Robert Forster, you might remember him, he's the bail bondsman, Max Cherry, in Jackie Brown. He was in an episode of Breaking Bad last year as like the guy spiriting Heisenberg away to his kind of seclusion when he was running from the police, that guy. Most famously, he was in The Black Hole back in the 70s. So to have this guy who's obviously not an Arab of any kind, he had like a mustache, and yeah, he had a crazy accent. They couldn't find any Arabs who were saying, "Hey, you know what? I could use the work. I can act a little bit." Literally, all the terrorists, like none of them. I think one terrorist that actually had lines was actually an Arab. The rest were like, I think there was a Puerto Rican in there. There were, you know, it's hard to describe. You know, they just gave him big, crazy hair and big, bushy beards and said, "Okay, I guess that's close enough." Other people in the cast, you had Martin Balsam, you had George Kennedy, you had Joey Bishop. It was like I said, it's an all-star cast. Robert Vaughn is in this. He plays, you know, a general down at the Pentagon telling them, "We can't go in. We can't go in." The president didn't give us the green light. One of those deals. He's like in 2 scenes. But there are people you recognize. You're like, what are these people doing in this movie? Because, truth be told, not a great movie. A little bit on the boring side. A little too heavy-handed. Like it kind of was like, we're trying to, you know, this is very serious business, because this is 86 when this movie came out, so this is like in the height of when these planes were being hijacked, so they're trying to give it some gravitas, but at the same time, it's a Chuck Norris action movie, so it's like, it was kind of clunky in the way they're trying to balance these two things, but it was based upon actual hijacking that took place like the year before, literally the year before. And a lot of the major plot points were taken from the actual events. Like there was a Navy dive team that happened to be on the flight. Shockingly enough, one of those actors was actually Chuck Norris's son, who was like a NASCAR driver. He's like, "Hey, Dad, put me in the movie." And he said, "Okay, you can be one of those guys." And at one point, in the real hijacking, there's like a German stewardess who's forced to identify certain passengers. That happened in this movie as well. It took a lot of those things. They were it was a TWA flight, and this airline was called like ATW or something like that. So they were trying to make those parallels. When they were first trying to make this movie, it was originally going to be based upon the real events that occurred 6 or 7 years earlier, where there was the hostage crisis in Iran, where they tried to send in the Delta Force to possibly rescue those hostages, and it was aborted or something went wrong and it was canceled, but it was a failed attempt. That's what the original plot was going to be about. Like it wasn't going to be a Chuck Norris shoot 'em up. It was going to be like a dramatization of these real events. And they actually brought in the original, like the founding member and the original CO of the Delta Force. And he was going to, advise on it and kind of give them pointers on how it all went down. But the executives wanted to change the ending so that the Delta Force was successful in rescuing the hostages. Now keep in mind, this is a very famous event that occurred. It's like the movie Argo. That's what we're talking about, the actual event. Okay, the people know what happened on the actual event, and for like literally 4 years later, they're like, we're just going to change the ending so that they were successful. Yeah, didn't fly, and the original commanding officer of the Delta Force, he quit the project because he thought this was ridiculous. So then they said, okay, forget that. We'll make it something totally different. So there you go. Good times had by all. What else can I tell you about this movie? Kind of funny thing happened. ABC Sports, for their showing of the Indianapolis 500, actually took the theme music from the Delta Force as like their theme music, as a lead-in from commercials and things like that. Why? I don't know. Were they just cheap? I mean, was that just a CD somebody happened to have in their car? I don't know. Speaking of that, the soundtrack for the movie, which, can you name any of those big hits from the Delta Force? I cannot either. They took the soundtrack from this movie recently, within the last 5 years, and combined it with the theme music from King Solomon's Mines, that Richard Chamberlain adventure movie from like '84. Combine them, and you can buy that CD on Amazon if you'd like. If you want to rock out to the hits of Delta Force and King Solomon's Mines, it's all there waiting for you. This movie actually was a modest success when it came out. I think it opened like third in the box office, behind like Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and Young Bloods, something like that. Roger Ebert, shockingly enough, gave it 3 out of 4 stars. He said it was gripping, edge of your seat excitement. I tend to disagree. Like I said, it's kind of a generic action movie. But I mean, frankly, this is true of many of Chuck Norris's works, sadly. It's fine if you got an afternoon, you're just kind of kicking back, and you're like, hey, what else am I going to do? Throw on the Delta Force. It's shoot 'em up. It's not excessively violent, but again, it's kind of the gravitas they give certain situations, coupled with the kind of mindless action, is kind of, I don't know, it's a little disturbing. Maybe disturbing is too strong a word. Off-putting? Maybe that's better. This movie currently has a 53% rotten on Rotten Tomatoes. That seems about right. Hey, they can't all be winners, folks. What can I tell you? So it is still streaming instantly on Netflix, so if you'd like to watch it, it is there for you, along with many of Chuck Norris's other catalog. Feel free to peruse. Next week, I'm moving away from the action genre. Actually, I'm not. It's kind of in the similar vein, but it's kind of an action comedy. We're going to be doing that award-winning, critically acclaimed film, Turner and Hooch, starring Tom Hanks and Beasley, the dog, as Hooch. So there you go. He's a cop. He's a dog. It's obviously the finest of all examples of the interracial buddy cop film. So there you go. So check that out. It is streaming instantly on Netflix. Let me know what you think. Go to our page on Facebook, Original B Movie Club. Go go to our page on YouTube and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at the B Movie Club. Send me any favorite scenes, favorite quotes, any movie suggestions, and I may just talk about it on the show. As you know, I end every episode with a totally out of context quote, and here it is. Sleep tight, sucker. So there it is. The Chuck Norris one-liner is right up there next to the Steven Seagal one-liner for like the most commonplace, random, like they came up with, what should he say here? I don't know, it's late, just write down anything. Sleep tight, sucker? Okay, sounds good. So there you have it. That was the Delta Force. Next week, Turner and Hooch, thank you for joining us, and be well.